She sat in the wrong seat at a Korean wedding, and the groom knelt. Nobody in that ballroom moved. Nobody breathed. And by midnight, the whole world had an opinion about a woman who had only come to Seoul to say goodbye. But that's not where this story begins. It begins 3 weeks earlier, with a jar of ashes, a one-way flight, and a grandmother's voice playing on a loop in the back of Zara Osei's mind. "You were made for rooms they didn't build for you, my love." Zara had heard those words her whole life. Standing in the arrivals hall of Incheon International Airport, pulling a carry-on that was too heavy and a grief that was heavier, she finally understood that her grandmother hadn't been speaking metaphorically. She had meant it literally. The Grand Hyatt Seoul was the kind of hotel that made you straighten your posture just walking through the doors, marble floors that reflected the chandeliers above them, staff who moved like water, present everywhere, visible nowhere. Zara had stayed in beautiful places before. Her travel blog, *Soft Landing, had taken her to 41 countries in 6 years. But there was something about this city that felt different. Something that pressed gently against the bruised part of her chest and didn't let go. She had 48 hours before her scheduled visit to Buckhanson, where she planned to scatter the last of her grandmother's ashes at the mountain summit. A final wish from a woman who had never left Ghana, but had spent 60 years collecting photographs of places she dreamed of standing. Seoul had been at the top of the list. So Zara had come in her place. She told herself that was the only reason she was here. She told herself that so many times on the 14-hour flight that she almost believed it. The truth was that Zara Osei had not written a single word in 4 months. The blog sat untouched. The drafts folder was full of opening sentences that went nowhere. The woman who had built a quiet, loyal audience on the simple promise of honest storytelling had nothing honest left to say, because the most honest thing she felt was a grief so clean and total it had taken language with it when it came. Her editor had called it burnout. Her mother had called it depression. Zara called it Tuesday. She checked in, dropped her bags, and decided that what she needed was not rest and not room service but movement. She changed into a simple black dress, not for any occasion, just because it was the first thing her hands found, and took the elevator down to the mezzanine level, following the distant sound of music and the warm, golden smell of food that had no business being that good at 4 in the afternoon. She followed the scent around a corridor, through a set of wide-open doors, and into a room so beautiful it made her stop walking. Flowers everywhere, white and blush and deep green, round tables draped in ivory, hundreds of white chairs arranged in careful rows before a ceremonial altar where 2 families stood in formal dress, speaking in low, reverent voices. She had walked into a wedding. Not her wedding, not a wedding she'd been invited to, not a wedding she had any business being within 50 feet of. She knew this immediately. She also knew it approximately 2 seconds too late, because in the moment she registered what room she was in, her heel caught the edge of the entrance carpet, her balance shifted, and the nearest chair caught her before the floor did. She sat down. The chair was in the 3rd row, slightly left of center, tied with a single white ribbon that she noticed only after she was already in it. "Get up," her internal voice said immediately. "Get up right now, Zara, before anyone sees you." But the room was full. The ceremony had already begun. A man in ceremonial robes was speaking at the front. Heads were bowed, and the last thing she wanted to do in a foreign country at a stranger's wedding was cause a scene by stumbling back out the way she had stumbled in. She would wait for a natural pause, 30 seconds, 60 at most. Then she would slip out quietly and no one would ever know. She folded her hands in her lap, dropped her eyes and breathed. That was when she felt it. It was not a sound. It was not a temperature change. It was something older and stranger than either of those things, a shift in the quality of the air around her, like a room settling after someone beloved had just entered it. Zara had felt it once before. The morning her grandmother died, before the call came, before she knew, she had woken from sleep with that exact feeling, like a presence arriving, like being gently, unmistakably held. Her throat tightened. "Nana." She didn't say it out loud. She barely let herself think it. But her eyes filled without her permission, and she blinked hard and stared at the floral arrangement in front of her until the feeling passed. It did not pass. And that was the moment Min Jun-ki walked in. He came through the side entrance in full traditional hanbok, navy and silver, perfectly pressed, the kind of ceremonial clothing that turns a man into a symbol. He was tall, still, moving through the room with the quiet certainty of someone who had rehearsed this moment so many times that the rehearsal had become the reality. He was going to be married in 11 minutes. He knew this. His family knew this. The 400 guests who had flown in from Seoul, Busan, Tokyo, and London knew this. What no one knew, what Min Jun had not told a single person alive, was that he had stood outside that door for 6 minutes before walking through it, pressing his back against the wall, asking his grandmother's spirit for a sign. "Halmoni, if this is wrong, tell me. If I am walking into the wrong life, show me something." He had waited. Nothing came. So he straightened his jacket, opened the door, and walked in. He was 3 steps into the room when he saw her. A woman in the 3rd row, black dress, natural hair, head bowed slightly, hands folded. There was nothing unusual about her stillness. Everyone in the room was still. But something made him stop walking. Something made his eyes land on her and stay there with a pull he could not explain or locate or argue with. And then he understood. She was sitting in his grandmother's seat. The white ribbon, the 3rd row, left of center. His mother had tied that ribbon herself the morning of the wedding. The chair was meant to be empty, a held space for a woman who could no longer hold space in any form the living could see. He should have felt anger, confusion at minimum. What he felt instead was the thing he had been asking for outside that door. Min Jun-ki walked to the 3rd row. He stopped beside the woman who had no idea he was standing there. And then, slowly, in front of 400 witnesses and one bewildered wedding coordinator, he went down on one knee. He was not proposing. He was not performing. He was doing the only thing that made sense to him in that moment, offering the same bow of respect he would have given his grandmother if she had been sitting there. "This is for you, Halmoni *, he said, in his mind in Korean, in the private language of their relationship. "Whoever she is sitting where you should be. So this is for you." He rose. He walked to the front of the room. And 6 phones in the 3rd and 4th rows had already captured every second of it. Welcome if you are new here to Velvet Empire, where the stories we tell are the ones that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. We are glad you found us. Stay until the end. This one matters. Before we go any further into this story, we want to pause for a moment and speak directly to you. Wherever you are watching this, whether it is morning where you are or late at night when the world has finally gone quiet, we want you to know that you are seen. You are not forgotten. And whatever weight you are carrying right now, you do not have to carry it alone. May your health be protected from every hidden threat. May your home be a place of peace, not performance. May your finances begin to shift in your favor slowly if they must, but surely. May your children and grandchildren be covered in wisdom and grace. May every door that was closed by the wrong hands be opened by the right ones. May the grief you have been sitting with quietly, the kind nobody asks about because it doesn't show on the outside, may it begin, gently, to lift. You deserve a life filled with dignity. You deserve joy that doesn't come with a price tag. You deserve to sit without apology in every room you walk into. If that blessing is for you today, leave an amen in the comments. And if Velvet Empire stories have ever moved you, stayed with you, or found you at exactly the right moment, subscribe. You are part of this family now, and this family shows up for each other. Now, back to Seoul. Because what happened after that 12-second video hit, the internet changed every life in that room, and some of them had no idea it was coming. By 11 that night, the clip had 4 million views. By morning, it had 19. Zara found out the way she found out most things she wasn't looking for, by opening her phone at 6 a.m. and watching the world have a conversation she hadn't consented to being the center of. She was trending in South Korea, the United Kingdom, Nigeria, and the United States simultaneously. Half the comments called it the most beautiful thing they had ever seen, a groom honoring a stranger, cultural grace, human decency in its purest form. The other half were less poetic. Staged, performative, a publicity stunt. Some corners of the internet had already written full threads about the optics of a black woman sitting in a Korean family's reserved seat and being celebrated for it. As though she had done something deliberately, as though she had planned any of this, as though she had not simply tripped over a carpet and sat down in the nearest chair because her heels were untrustworthy and her grief had her moving through the world at half her usual capacity. She turned her phone face down on the hotel nightstand. Then she picked it up again. Then she put it down. Nana would have laughed, she thought, full belly laugh, the kind that bent her in half. The thought arrived with a pain so sharp and clean it took her breath away for exactly 4 seconds. Then she got dressed. She had a mountain to climb. What Zara did not know, could not have known, was that 3 floors below her, in the hotel's executive suite, the wedding she had briefly interrupted had not survived the night. Min-jun and Soyeon Park had sat in that suite for 2 hours after the reception ended, not arguing, not crying, doing something far more dangerous than either of those things. Telling the truth. It had been Soyeon who spoke first, which surprised neither of them. You felt something when you saw her, Soyeon said, not an accusation, a statement. The kind of thing only 2 people who have known each other long enough to skip pretense can say to each other. Min-jun was quiet for a long time. When he was angry, he became quieter, not louder. This was not anger. I felt Halmoni, he said finally. I felt her the way I haven't felt her since the hospital, and it scared me. And then I thought, what kind of man am I, walking into a marriage, asking for a sign, and then pretending I didn't get one? Soyeon looked at him for a long moment, and then she did something he would remember for the rest of his life. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. I have been in love with someone else for 2 years, she said quietly. I was going to marry you anyway because I love your family and I am terrified of my own. But I think today happened so neither of us would have to keep lying. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of relief and grief and the particular exhaustion of 2 people who have been performing a future they never chose. We are going to break 4 families' hearts before sunrise, Min-jun thought. We are going to be free, Soyeon thought. They were both right. Madame Ki received the news at midnight. Min-jun delivered it himself, standing in the doorway of his parents' suite with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up, stripped of ceremony, offering only the plain fact of what he had decided. His mother sat very still. She was a woman who had built her entire emotional architecture on control, controlled spaces, controlled outcomes, controlled people lovingly but completely. She had reserved that chair at the wedding herself. She had tied that ribbon with her own hands. She had whispered to her mother-in-law's photograph that morning, I am taking care of everything, Halmoni. Watch. She looked at her son for a long time. You are telling me, she said very carefully, that a stranger sat in your grandmother's chair and you took that as a message from the dead. Yes. And now you are ending a 7-year relationship the night of your wedding. Yes. Because of 12 seconds. Minjun held her gaze. Because of 12 seconds and 2 years of honesty I didn't have until tonight. Madame Key stood. She walked to the window. Seoul glittered below her, indifferent and eternal. When she turned back around, something in her face had shifted. Not softened, that was not a word that applied to this woman, but moved, rearranged. Your grandmother used to say, she began slowly, that the people who arrive in your life sideways, not through the front door, not announced, not invited, those are the ones the universe sends because it knows you will not open the door for what you need. She picked up her glass. Find out who she is. Minjun stared at his mother. I'm not saying chase her. Madame Key said precisely. I am saying find out who she is. If it is nothing, it is nothing. But your grandmother did not traffic in coincidence, and neither do I. What happened next changed everything. Because Diana Kwon, the investigative journalist who had spent 15 years building her reputation on the architecture of other people's stories, had already found out who Zara was. Diana had been at the wedding on assignment, human interest piece. The Key family was quietly significant in Korean industrial circles, and Soyeon Park's family carried old political money. The wedding had been considered a minor social event worth a few hundred words and a photograph. Then the video happened. And Diana, who had a gift for smelling the gap between the story being told and the story that was true, had pulled her press credential and her instincts and started making calls before midnight. By 7 a.m. she had Zara's blog. By 7:15 she had the most recent entry published 6 months ago, titled simply "She carried whole countries in her chest," a tribute to Zara's grandmother that had made Diana, who cried at nothing, sit completely still for 4 minutes after reading it. By 7:45 she was in the hotel lobby. Zara came out of the elevator at 8:10, wearing hiking boots and carrying a small clay-colored jar in a canvas bag on her shoulder, and she was halfway to the door when Diana stepped into her path. Zara Osei. Zara stopped, looked at her, the careful, measuring look of a woman who had learned to read rooms quickly. I'm not doing interviews, Zara said. I know, I'm not here for an interview. Diana paused. I read your piece about your grandmother, the one about the photographs she kept, the places she never got to go. Something crossed Zara's face. Not softness, the thing that comes before softness, the drop in the guard that happens when someone says the right true thing. She had Seoul on her list, Diana said quietly. I saw the photograph you posted, the postcard she kept on her mirror. Zara adjusted the strap on her bag. I just want to understand what actually happened in that room yesterday, Diana said. Not for a story. Not yet. Because I have been in this city for 3 years and I have never seen anything like that. And I think the version the internet has is not the real version, and the real version matters. Zara looked at her for a long moment. She is not lying, her gut said. She is the first person who has asked about Nana and not immediately moved on. I'm going to Buckhanson, Zara said finally. You can walk and talk, but when I get to the summit I need 10 minutes alone. Diana nodded. I'll bring coffee. They left the hotel together in the early morning cool of a Seoul spring, the city waking around them in layers, the smell of street food and diesel, and something floral and unnameable. And Zara told Diana the real story of how she had ended up in that chair. No drama, no metaphor, just the truth, the carpet, the heel, the nearest seat, the ribbon she hadn't noticed until it was too late. That's it, Diana said. That's it. Diana was quiet for a moment. Then, and the feeling you described in the chair, you wrote about that on your private account. Someone screenshot it. Zara stopped walking. My private account has 40 followers. Had, Diana said, with the particular grimace of someone delivering news they did not enjoy delivering. It has 200,000 this morning. The mountain received them in silence. Buckhanson in spring is a particular kind of beautiful granite peaks cutting through air that smells of pine and cold water, and something ancient that has no modern name. Zara climbed without speaking for the last 40 minutes, Diana a respectful distance behind her, and when they reached the summit Zara took out the small clay jar and stood at the edge of the overlook and looked out at Seoul spread below her like a living map. "I brought you, Nana, I brought you." She opened the jar. The wind took what was inside and carried it out over the city, and Zara stood very still and let the tears come, not violently, just steadily, the way water finds its level. She did not hear Minjun arrive. She did not know he had followed the same path his grandmother had described to him once, years ago, on a night when he was 17 and furious at the world, and she had taken him by the wrist and said, "When soul becomes too loud, go up. The mountain always knows what to do with what you bring it." He had not planned to be here. He had not planned any of today. He came around the granite outcrop and stopped when he saw her, the woman from the chair standing at the summit edge, one hand pressed flat against her chest, eyes closed, face turned into the wind. He almost left. This is not your moment, he told himself. This belongs to her. But then she opened her eyes and turned, the way you turn when you feel someone watching, and she saw him. Neither of them spoke. Below them, the city moved. 11 million people going about the ordinary miracle of their lives. Traffic and music and argument and laughter, and all the endless human noise of a city that had been here for centuries and would be here for centuries more. Up here there was only wind. "You're the groom," Zara said finally. "Yes." "The wedding," she started, "is not happening." He said it without drama, without the performance of pain, simply the way he said all things that mattered. It was not right, it had not been right for a long time. Zara looked at him. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," he paused. "The chair you were sitting in belonged to my grandmother. She died 3 weeks ago." The wind moved between them. Zara closed her eyes briefly. "I didn't know. I walked into the wrong room. I wasn't trying to." "I know." He was quiet for a moment. "When I saw you in that chair, I felt her. I know how that sounds." "It doesn't sound strange," Zara said softly. "I felt something too, in the chair. I thought I was losing my mind." "Maybe we both were," Minjun said. And something shifted then, not dramatically, not with music or declaration, but the way shifts happen in real life. Quietly, completely, with the feeling of something that had been held at tension for too long finally finding its natural resting place. "What are you doing tomorrow?" he asked. Zara looked at him, a long, careful look. "Nothing," she said. "For the first time in 4 months, absolutely nothing." He nodded slowly. "Soul is better when someone shows you where to look." She almost smiled, not quite, the almost was enough. Below them, unbeknownst to either of them, Diana Kwon was sitting on a granite step 50 meters away, notebook closed, coffee going cold, watching 2 strangers stand at the top of a mountain in the early morning light. And writing nothing, because some stories announce themselves as sacred before you even understand what they are. She would write it eventually. She would write it beautifully and honestly and without a single false note. But not today. Today belonged to the mountain, and the wind, and a grandmother's ashes finding their way home, and 2 people who had each arrived at the summit carrying something they were finally, at last, ready to put down. The fallout came, as fallout always does in waves. Madame Key issued a statement through the family's communications team, brief, measured, and so carefully worded that it communicated everything by saying almost nothing. The wedding had been postponed due to personal circumstances. Both families requested privacy. Minjun was grateful for the public's warmth and wished to address nothing further at this time. Soyeon Park spent the day with the woman she had loved in secret for 2 years. She did not look at her phone once. Diana's piece ran 4 days later. not the viral story. The real one, Zara's grief, the grandmother's photograph, the clay jar, the mountain, Minjun's loss and his quiet act of reverence. The strange, undeniable grace of two people who had both come to the same summit to say goodbye to someone and ended up, cautiously and with no promises, saying hello to each other instead. It was the most read piece of Diana's career. She dedicated it, in the small print at the bottom that most people never notice, to a Ghanaian grandmother who had a postcard of Seoul on her mirror and never got to stand where her granddaughter stood. Zara read the piece in a cafe off in Sadong on her fifth morning in a city she had planned to leave after 2. She read it slowly. Read it again. Then she opened a new document on her laptop, the first she had opened in 4 months, and she wrote a single line. She didn't delete it. She kept going. The words came the way grief eventually does when it has finally been witnessed, not all at once, not without pain, but forward. Always forward. Minjun read the piece in the back of a car, heading to a meeting his mother had rescheduled 3 times before he finally agreed to attend. He read it without expression. His assistant, who had worked for him for 4 years and could read him better than most, watched him go very still somewhere in the middle of it and not move for a long time. She said nothing, looked out her window, gave him the privacy of his own face. Some things are not for witnesses. Some things are just for the person sitting in them. Madame Key read the piece alone, at her desk, after midnight, with the photograph of her mother-in-law facing her from the corner of the room. When she finished, she sat for a very long time. Then she said, to the photograph, in a voice barely above a whisper, "You always did have a dramatic sense of timing, Halmoni." She could have sworn the room shifted slightly. Just the air, just the way a room settles at night. She smiled for the first time in weeks and went to bed. There is a version of this story the internet decided on in the first 24 hours. A version that was clean and symbolic and emotionally satisfying in the way that 12-second clips are designed to be. That version was not wrong, it was just incomplete. The complete version involves a woman who came to a city to grieve and stayed to live. A man who asked for a sign and had the courage to believe he received one. A journalist who put down her notebook at the exact right moment. A wedding that ended and freed 2 people in the same breath. A grandmother's ashes on a mountain in spring. And a chair, one single white-ribboned chair, that somehow held all of it. Was it coincidence? Was it something older and less easily named than coincidence? Maybe the question is not which one it was. Maybe the question is, what do you do when the universe sits you down somewhere you didn't plan to be, and everything around you begins to rearrange itself, and somewhere deep in your chest, you recognize the feeling not as confusion but as arrival? Do you get up and leave quietly? Or do you stay long enough to find out what the room is trying to tell you? Leave your answer in the comments. We genuinely want to know what you would have done. And if this story found you at the right moment, if something in it landed somewhere real like this video, share it with someone who needs it and subscribe to Velvet Empire. Every story we tell exists because you stay until the end. That is not a small thing. That is everything. More stories are waiting for you, deeper ones, the kind that don't let go. And sometimes, the ending we fear the most becomes the beginning we needed.